How would you feel if you woke up tomorrow to find that the coastlines of the world had completely rewritten themselves? Imagine the beach where you spent your childhood summer now sitting 100 miles inland, surrounded by dry, grassy plains. Or picture walking across what is now the cold ocean floor, completely dry, and stumbling upon the ancient ruins of a long-lost valley. This might sound like the premise of a science fiction movie, but for our ancestors, it was a living reality. Around 20,000 years ago, the Earth looked so different that a modern map would be completely useless. Sea levels were a staggering 120 meters lower than they are today, exposing vast lands that are now buried under the ocean. Before we explore this incredible forgotten era, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more of these deep history stories to light, and turning on notifications ensures you never miss a journey. Now, let us step back into a world that was both deeply familiar and utterly alien. Let us journey back in time, approximately 100,000 years ago, to the sun-drenched landscapes of East Africa. Here, we would find the very first groups of anatomically modern humans. These individuals possessed the exact same brain capacity, the same deep capacity for emotion, and the same complex thoughts as any person living in the year 2026. Yet despite having minds identical to ours, the physical world they stepped into every morning was completely unrecognizable. There were no roads, no concrete structures, and no borders, only an endless untamed wilderness stretching to the horizon. They had to make sense of a planet where the climate, the geography, and even the creatures they shared the land with were vastly different from anything we know today. To understand why this world was so different, we have to look at the global water cycle during the peak of the Ice Age. Because so much of the planet's water was locked up in massive ice sheets covering the northern continents, the oceans were much smaller. Sea levels dropped to a point that is hard for us to comprehend, revealing millions of square kilometers of land that are now underwater. If you were to look at a globe from that period, you would barely recognize the shapes of the continents. Islands that we now reach by airplane or boat were once high-altitude mountains rising from dry land. It was a world of vast, open steppes and massive land bridges, allowing humans and animals to travel across areas that are now deep-sea channels. Among these lost regions, some of the most vibrant human habitats were eventually claimed by the sea. For instance, Great Britain was not an island but was connected to mainland Europe by a vast, marshy plain known as Doggerland. This area was not a barren wasteland but a highly productive ecosystem filled with rivers, lakes, and rich vegetation. Further east, the Persian Gulf was a fertile green river valley, watered by the ancient ancestors of the Tigris and Euphrates. And in the far north, a massive land bridge called Beringia linked Siberia to Alaska. This cold, grassy highway allowed humans to walk from one continent to another, eventually spreading across the Americas. In Southeast Asia, the geography was equally surprising, with many modern islands merged into a single massive landmass called Sundaland. To the south of this peninsula lay Sahul, a giant continent that joined Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania together. For a long time, early historians assumed that our ancient ancestors were too primitive to navigate the open ocean. However, the archaeological record shows that humans arrived in Sahul at least 50,000 years ago. To get there, they had to cross deep water gaps of over 90 kilometers, which could only be done with deliberate planning and seaworthy watercraft too. This incredible feat proves that these early Australians were not just passive wanderers, but highly skilled mariners capable of navigating the open sea too. These ancient borders were never permanent, as the boundaries between land and sea were constantly shifting. Over generations, the global climate warmed and cooled, causing coastlines to retreat and advance in cycles. For a family living near the coast, the ocean was a dynamic force that changed within their own lifetimes. A fishing camp used by a grandfather might be completely submerged by the time his grandson grew old. This forced communities to remain highly mobile, constantly adapting their territories to a world that refused to stay still. It created a cultural mindset where change was expected, and flexibility was the ultimate key to survival. As the oceans began their final, rapid rise at the end of the Ice Age, the loss of these fertile lands left a deep scar on the human psyche. Imagine watching your homeland, where your ancestors had lived for thousands of years, slowly disappear beneath the waves. These dramatic events were likely discussed around campfires for generations, passing down the memory of the rising seas. Many historians and anthropologists believe that these real historical migrations are the origin of the flood myths found in almost every ancient culture. From the Epic of Gilgamesh to indigenous oral histories in Australia, the memory of a drowning world has survived for thousands of years. It is a powerful reminder of how deeply our ancient history is embedded in the stories we still tell today. If we could escape the physical geography for a moment and look upward, we would witness a sight that no modern city dweller can experience. Before the invention of electricity, the night sky was entirely untouched by artificial light pollution. The darkness was so pure and profound that it allowed the heavens to reveal their full, brilliant glory. The Milky Way would have appeared as a bright, highly detailed river of starlight cutting across the sky. It was so bright that it actually cast soft shadows on the ground, illuminating the landscape in a gentle, silver glow. For our ancestors, the cosmos was not a distant abstraction, but a highly visible, comforting part of their nightly environment. This brilliant sky was much more than just a beautiful view to admire before going to sleep. It served as the ultimate survival tool, acting as a giant, celestial calendar and navigation system. 3. By tracking the positions of specific constellations, early humans knew exactly when the seasons were about to change. The stars told them when the winter cold was coming, when the great herds of animals would begin to migrate, and when the rivers would swell with seasonal rains. 3. In a world without watches or maps, the sky was a reliable guide that kept humanity aligned with the natural cycles of the earth. It was a form of cosmic literacy that every member of the tribe understood. Walking through the landscapes of the ancient world, you would quickly realize that you were not at the top of the food chain. The planet was dominated by megafauna, a collection of massive animal species that are now entirely extinct. Woolly mammoths, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats ruled the grasslands and forests. 5. These creatures were of a scale that is hard to imagine today, with some mammoths standing over 4 meters tall. The ecosystems of the Ice Age were incredibly rich, supporting a density of large animals that we only see today in protected national parks. 6. It was a truly grand stage where human beings were just one small part of a much larger, wilder drama. Living alongside these giants required a delicate balance of extreme caution, respect, and clever strategy. Mammoths and other large animals were not just dangerous predators or prey, but spiritual entities that dominated the human imagination. We know this because of the breathtaking art our ancestors left behind on the walls of deep caves. Paintings in caves like Lascaux show incredibly detailed drawings of bison, horses, and mammoths, captured with stunning accuracy and motion. These images were not simple decorations, but a way for humans to process their relationship with the powerful creatures of their world. They represent the earliest recorded attempts to document the beauty and terror of the natural world. Sadly, this era of giants eventually came to an end. As modern humans expanded their territory into new continents, the populations of these massive animals began to decline rapidly. Within a few thousand years of human arrival in North and South America, almost all of the megafauna had vanished forever. While scientists still debate whether climate change or human hunting was the main driver of this extinction, the loss was permanent. It left behind a planet that was much poorer in terms of biodiversity and ecological scale. The magnificent giants that had shaped the Earth for millions of years were gone, leaving humans as the dominant force on the planet. It was not only the animals that disappeared, the very landscapes themselves underwent dramatic transformations. Perhaps the most famous example is the Sahara, which we today think of as a vast, lifeless desert of sand dunes. But 10,000 years ago, the Sahara was a lush, green savanna filled with flowing rivers, deep lakes, and abundant wildlife. Early humans lived in this green Sahara, carving images of crocodiles and hippos into the desert rocks. When the global climate shifted once again, the rains failed and the region dried up, forcing these communities to flee. This massive migration drove people toward the Nile River Valley, ultimately leading to the rise of ancient Egyptian civilization. When we look at vast forests like the Amazon today, we often view them as untouched, pristine wilderness. However, modern archaeological research has revealed that humans have been actively shaping these environments for thousands of years. The Amazon was once home to large, organized societies that modified the soil to make it highly fertile. They planted specific species of fruit and nut trees, effectively creating a massive, semi-domesticated forest that supported large populations. This shows that our ancestors were not just passive foragers who left no trace behind. They were active land managers who understood how to work with nature to sustain their communities over long periods. Along with lost forests and coastlines, the ancient world was defined by great river systems that no longer exist. These lost rivers were the lifelines of early human migration, providing fresh water and abundant resources. Some of these rivers now flow deep underground, hidden beneath the shifting sands of deserts like the Sahara. Others were completely drowned by the rising seas, their ancient channels still visible to modern scientists using sonar technology on the ocean floor. These waterways were the original highways of our species, guiding our ancestors as they explored the globe. When these rivers disappeared, the geographic networks that had defined human life for generations were lost forever. It is easy to think of the Ice Age as a static, frozen period, but it was actually a time of intense climate instability. Temperatures could shift dramatically over the course of just a few decades, causing forests to die back and grasslands to expand. These sudden changes forced human communities to be incredibly resilient and adaptable. They could not rely on a single source of food or a single hunting ground for very long. Instead, they had to be ready to move, to learn new skills, and to adapt to entirely new ecosystems at a moment's notice. This constant pressure created a culture of continuous learning and innovation. In fact, many anthropologists believe that this extreme climate instability is the main reason why the human brain developed the way it did. Our intelligence did not evolve in a comfortable, stable environment, but in a world that was constantly throwing new challenges at us. The ability to plan for the future, communicate complex ideas, and work together in groups became our greatest assets. In this light, our high-level cognitive skills are not just a luxury, but a direct product of our ancestors' struggle to survive a changing planet. We are, quite literally, designed by nature to handle change. Our brains are built to find creative solutions when the world around us becomes unpredictable. Before the rise of modern industrial civilization, our ancestors lived in a world with a completely different acoustic environment. There were no engines, no humming electricity, and no sirens, only the pure sounds of the natural world. In this quiet landscape, human hearing was incredibly sharp and highly attuned to the environment. They could read the forest like a book, understanding the meaning of a bird's warning call or the subtle change in the wind that signaled an approaching storm. This deep acoustic connection allowed them to feel entirely at home in the wilderness. It was a level of sensory awareness that most modern humans living in noisy cities can scarcely imagine. The people who lived through these incredible changes did not have textbooks to tell them they were living in the Ice Age. They did not know that the giant mammoths they hunted would one day be extinct, or that the lands they walked on would be covered by the sea. They simply lived their lives in the present moment, experiencing the world with a sense of wonder and curiosity. Their cave paintings, carved tools, and carefully placed handprints on stone walls tell us that they wanted to leave a mark. They had the same desire to express themselves, to tell stories, and to connect with future generations that we do today. In those quiet caves, the gap of thousands of years seems to disappear entirely. When we look back at the world of our ancestors, with its lost coastlines, giant beasts, and star-filled skies, we might feel a sense of loss. Yet, the most important takeaway is not how much the world has changed, but how much of their spirit remains within us. The same resilience that allowed them to cross oceans and survive ice ages is part of our shared human heritage. Today, as we face our own environmental challenges and a rapidly changing world, we can draw strength from their story. We are the descendants of the ultimate survivors, equipped with the same brains and the same capacity for cooperation that saved them. By understanding our past, we can find the wisdom to navigate our future with confidence and hope. Which of these incredible lost landscapes would you have wanted to see with your own eyes? Would you have walked the green plains of Doggerland or stood beneath the brilliant, unpolluted night sky? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and please subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring the secrets of our past together.